Mr. Gardner, Delta Vision Foundation.
Good morning, Ron. Thank you very much for your attention to this subject. As you know, we've been advocating for at least 2 years that this committee get started, because implementation is, frankly, the state's failing in fixing the Delta. And so we need to see a very strong commitment. I have some suggestions, maybe picking up on comments by Mr. Fiorini. On the leadership issue, we believe that the leadership of this should be at the highest level, so that it's the chair or vice chair of this group. And as we've suggested in our report card, that it's actually a cooperative effort with the Secretary of Natural Resources. And I would suggest that we form a co-chair arrangement, because the Department of Natural Resources Agency has implementation responsibility for many of the pieces of the Delta Plan. So we can combine the work of this group to set the overall vision and direction and the performance measures with the implementation capacity of the Natural Resources Agency. And at that level, we start to address the issues that you were just raising of how do we get the agencies to actually commit to doing this. The staff memo, I think, appropriately highlights and notes that the Little Hoover Commission commented that the state lacks a performance management structure. And that's a second area where I think the Stewardship Council should make a strong statement of what are we trying to accomplish. Put forward the goals, even before the logistics of how this committee are worked out. And we're in essence, we're putting the committee before the results, and the results have to come first. So I think that the performance outcome expectations are what will align the agencies. And we can't keep pushing down the road this problem that we are not a performance management-based approach to fixing the Delta. So we can set up another committee, and at some point they'll develop the performance measures. I think this group ought to start to articulate those top-level performance outcomes. What are we trying to achieve? And use those to start to align the agencies on implementation. And then lastly, I wanted to touch on the transparency issue. I think that's another area where you as the council can make specific commitments up front to quarterly reporting on those performance metrics, on implementation metrics, on adaptive management, on all the different elements, but commit to that transparency now as a policy statement before creating the mission and the logistics of how it'll work. Thank you.
Mr. Gardner, I maybe you explained this, but I don't understand it. How do we adopt our outcomes before the Delta Plan itself is adopted by the council? Because the statutory language says we shall establish and oversee a committee of agencies responsible for implementing the Delta Plan. Each agency shall coordinate its actions pursuant to the Delta Plan with the council and the other relevant agencies. That's our authority for this implementation committee, and it's tied to the Delta Plan. But as I understand it, you want us to do something in advance of the Delta Plan adoption. Explain to me what you want.
Well, I think your question gets at the larger issue of is the Delta Plan articulating the outcomes that we desire, which is the basis of a performance management-based approach. And I would argue that it does not yet effectively do that. In fact, I will do that when I comment on the final when it's released. So I think there's more work to be done now in articulating where are we going with the Delta Plan, what outcomes are we trying to achieve.
My suggestion is you reduce those to writing in the next week so we can actually have your ideas that you will otherwise only present to us in the middle or late January, which is 7 days in advance of our February meeting on the implementation committee. And since you already know what your opinions are on the performance measures, it would be useful to get it ASAP, not wait.
when we get to near-term actions, I'll give you some examples on that subject. I've certainly previously made numerous comments on performance management and the overall direction of the Delta plan. So this isn't a new subject, but I'm happy to provide those in whatever way is helpful. But my overall point is that knowing where we're going is a vehicle for starting to align the agencies to participate in getting there. And I think that can be part of how you structure the implementation.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right.